The following half-hour show is a paid political program and is not endorsed by this station, management, or staff.
The following program is sponsored by Excalibur Insurance Management Services.
In this week's show, as in last week's show, we have a unique situation. I'm sure you remember that Representative Marty Flynn was supposed to appear last week, but due to his difficulties before the Commonwealth Court of Pennsylvania regarding his ethics forms, he was precluded from attending. Instead, you heard from Lieutenant Colonel Joe Albert, who discussed his challenge to Representative Flynn's ethics forms, as well as he recounted what took place in the courtroom. Today, we have Representative Flynn in studio to discuss his candidacy, and he is accompanied by his new attorney, Attorney Larry Moran Jr., to discuss the legal issues raised by Colonel Albert's challenge. Attorney Moran was not representing Mr. Flynn last week in court. We also have in studio this week the Green Party nominee for the Senate seat, Marlene Sebastianelli, who is a first-time candidate for public office. A little background on Ms. Sebastianelli is in order. She grew up in the Abingtons, graduating from Abington Heights High School, and then went on to earn a Bachelor of Science degree in Communication Disorders, as well as an MBA in Business from Marywood University. She has a long career in healthcare, becoming a nursing home administrator, and eventually becoming Regional Vice President of Operations of a large healthcare network, Sabre Healthcare. She has also been a consultant to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania on regulatory compliance in nursing homes throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. She is also a small business owner, both of a winery as well as a health and wellness facility. Marlene is a cancer survivor and worked with the Susan G. Komen Foundation as well as the American Cancer Society, where she served as a community ambassador in Washington, earning Volunteer of the Year award. Now about Mr. Flynn's background. Beside being a representative, he was first elected to the House of Representatives in 2012, representing the 113th Legislative District. He is in his fifth term. When Senator John Blake of the 22nd Senatorial District announced his resignation, it created a vacancy. Representative Flynn submitted his name for the Democratic nomination to fill the seat. He secured that nomination by a large margin. Marty is a native of Scranton, a 2000 graduate of Marywood University, where he earned a bachelor's degree of science in legal studies. He is a former Lackawanna County Prison Inmate Education Program Coordinator. He was also chairman of the Prison Misconduct Board. Prior to that, he was a Lackawanna County prison guard and was a mixed martial arts fighter as well as a professional boxer for 10 years. We are happy to discuss both of their candidacies on today's show.
This is the Volpe Report, a weekly news and political interview show examining the latest local, state, and national issues with Chuck Volpe. Insightful, informative, controversial, the area's premier political talk show, the Volpe Report.
Marty, welcome to the Volpe Report.
Thanks for having me.
And Larry, also, welcome to the Volpe Report.
Thank you, Chuck, for having me.
Well, thank you both for coming. To kind of set the table, before I turn to you, Larry, Marty, Representative Flynn, member of the Pennsylvania House of Representatives. By way of background, you have been a guest on my show a few times in the past, always good shows. And you are now, I believe, is it your fifth term?
Yes.
In the House of Representatives of Pennsylvania. Now, normally what I do in the seasons is that when a major office, usually starting at senator and up, I usually don't cover rep races, but I cover Senate races for the state, and then, of course, United States Congress, U.S. Senate, and above. So I was covering the Senate race, and in a normal time, in a normal year, you know, you would have been on the show last week, actually, or after Chris Shermeck, who was the Republican nominee and Lackawanna County Commissioner, challenging you for the Pennsylvania Senate seat that you're going to be on the primary ballot for May 18th. Having said all that, I think I should point out to our audience that you were not Mr. Flynn's attorney on Friday before the Commonwealth Court, last Friday, I should say, which means you're here now having been retained by him to help him out of what clearly was a train wreck as it took place in Commonwealth Court. So, in summarizing, the main thrust of the argument that you're going to have to answer for is that, led by the Republican state attorneys and set forth by Joe Albert, is that Representative Flynn filed numerous ethical forms, also numerously inaccurate ethical forms. And there were issues about the deadline, the signature, but mainly in terms of discussing and revealing his assets, there were issues about that, so that he had to refile several times, including several times during the Commonwealth Court proceeding. Again, you bear no responsibility for that because you weren't there, but you are here today, and you are going to help him through this problem and try to see that he stays in the ballot. So take it really from there. You now know what the issue is. What would be your response?
My response is we have to start from what's at issue here. What's at issue here is this candidate's statement of financial interest, and that is a requirement of the Pennsylvania Ethics Act. The Pennsylvania Ethics Act says that a candidate for public office must timely file a statement of financial interest for his or her nominating papers, certificates, or petitions to be valid. And the point of that is it dovetails into the election code. So the election code talks about the filing of papers in order to get on the ballot to run for office. So an aspiring public servant must get the signatures typically of citizens, qualified electors, and file nominating petitions. My candidacy is being nominated. In an instance of a special election like we have here, the respective and recognized parties through bylaws that the state parties operate are able to make a recommendation, and the parties certify a candidate by way of a nomination certificate. Okay, so that's the only distinction there. But both nomination certificates and nominating petitions need to have accompanying statements of financial interest.
Right.
And the Ethics Act plainly says that is true, and that it shall be a defect to the nominating papers or petitions or certificates if it is not filed.
Right.
Okay, that's what it said. In the mid-2000s, and as Chuck mentioned, he and I are students of this longer than Representative Flynn is, most likely.
Right. Sure.
And have been involved in these things in different professional capacities longer than Representative Flynn has. In the mid-2000s, a series of case law became developed through those cases that you just mentioned, when the judges were getting annoyed because they were quote-unquote ticky-tack matters all the time. In the mid-2000s, so it was a very short window of time, a rule got developed called the fatal defect rule. And it got expanded through several cases, and that's why they're all fact-specific. And courts, on an individual challenge, the individual that was here, his name is Mr. Albert. Right. He is an objector. So that's what is required by the law. A qualified elector must bring an objection to the nominating papers.
He did.
So, he did.
Along with Charlie Spano.
Correct.
Two-party litigants.
So most of the case law, the lawsuits, the rules that come out of courts in this state are the names of people like him, for instance. So this case will be N. Ray Albert or N. Ray Spano in most instances. But because of all these N. Ray matters, it became a mountain of litigation, and for judicial economy purposes, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court in 2007 said, stop. It said, for the last couple of years, the case law has expanded this fatal defect rule to make everything potentially a defect or a fatality to a candidate's nominating petitions, where we've expanded and we've given birth to this robust avalanche of gotcha litigation, where everybody's getting a lawyer now, and everybody who runs for office, whether it's for school board or township supervisor or state senator or U.S. Congress, is running in saying, what about block number 3 of the statement of financial interest? What about block number 4? What about block? So let me talk about what that is. The statement of financial interest is a one-page form that asks candidates, says before you can certify, you got to tell the public where your money comes from and who you owe money to, essentially. And it says you must list your sources of income. And it says separately, you must list who your creditors are in certain instances. And I will tell you, I've worked with candidates who are themselves lawyers. They agonize over these things. It does take time. If effort gets put into it, it should be comprehensive. It should be a little bit of an audit. A lot of times it's not. A lot of times it's a lazy effort. So a lot of times people don't pay attention to it. But in the mid-2000s, everybody was paying attention to it, to the point where there was lots and lots of this, because it was a fatal defect. If I can catch somebody who has a credit card debt and they forgot to list MasterCard, then I don't have to spend $300,000 beating them at the ballot box. They're gone. And that became the common tactic. It was literally like political consultants were talking about it as you do opposition research, you have a media budget, but you have a litigation budget, essentially. Like you got to throw all this money at the lawsuit to try to get them off the ballot. So they've
weaponized it. Effectively,
they've weaponized
a gotcha type of strategy to save yourself a lot of money and aggravation by torpedoing somebody before they even get to be on the ballot.
Precisely right. So in 2007, just a bit of local history that's relevant here today. For instance, a couple of things were at play. It was a municipal election year. which meant city and county races, for instance, around the ballot, all over Pennsylvania. And there was a county commissioner race, for instance, in Lackawanna County. Right. And there was a very popular elected register of wills, or she was a row officer for sure, and she wanted to be a commissioner. And a guy who ultimately won hired a lawyer, although he didn't do it himself. He got an objector, and they got a really good lawyer. The guy's name was Greg Harvey. He was the foremost expert in the state, and he's dead now.
And the candidate, as I recall, I think it might have been clerk of judicial records, was Every Rafalco.
You're exactly right. You're exactly right. And because in that sense, she was popular.
Right.
And she was the front runner.
Of
and
course.
This guy, nobody knew who he was.
Attorney Corey O'Brien, who became the commissioner.
Correct.
Yes.
So the first tactic was go down to Philadelphia and hire a very expensive lawyer from Montgomery, McCracken, Walker and Rhodes, a big white shoe Philadelphia firm, and find a way to get her off. And he did. And he identified defects where this candidate did not list certain credit card debt. Small, as I'll call it, ticky-tack stuff.
Right.
And they went to court. And there was a panel of judges that year because the Court of Common Pleas, when the commissioners run, must also sit as the election board.
Right.
So the election board and the court were three persons. It was Judge Thomas J. Munley, I remember this, Carmen Minora, and S. John Catone, who was then a senior judge. And they authored an opinion. And they said, we know what the law is. We know what the fatal defect rule is. We know what the bright line rule of the appellate courts are. And we know our obligation to follow it, but we're not going to do that. We're going with our hearts on this one. Right. We're sick of litigants and candidates being able to weaponize the courts and using the courts as swords to strike off candidacies. Right. We should be in shields, enfranchising voters and protecting the electorate and letting the voters have their voice at the ballot box. And just ironically, because it wasn't their case, but a guy by the name of Bob Brady was running for mayor of Philadelphia. And the guy who ultimately won, named Michael Nutter, got somebody to challenge his nominating petitions on the same issue. He had left off sources of income, I believe. Right. And Greg Harvey told this O'Brien guy at the time, you have to wait back and yield to what they do with Brady, because the Supreme Court's going to make a new rule on this. Right. And they took the Brady case and they essentially adopted what our own judges in Lackawanna County said. Right. And they said this has to end. So here's the new rule. Here is our interpretation of the Ethics Act. Right. Any defect to the form itself, any content defect is amendable. The only thing that is not is the timely filing of one. Right. So if you file it a minute late, if you file it the next day, if you file it a week later, you're off the ballot. Right. That is the fatality. Right. It's the unfiled one or the late filed one. Right. But the contents are amendable, and that answers your question in a long-winded way. It's why you saw so many iterations of this gentleman's statement of financial interest, and that tells me that even the other side knows the law. Right. Because they watched and encouraged him to amend his statement 4 times.
Right. Now, Marty, obviously you've heard all this, so I'm going to guess you're waiting for the outcome, and as of the airing of this show, which is Thursday, this show, of course, appears, and they're seeing us Sunday. So in the 3 days, it's possible, theoretically, that we could get a decision, either removing you from the ballot or saying that you can stay on it based on the issue that Councilor Moran has eloquently stated here. So having said that, the question that is relevant, especially to the show on Sunday, will it be your intention, if you are in fact removed from the ballot, to proceed to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court on an appeal?
Yes, definitely, definitely.
And I'm guessing the paperwork is probably already ready to go on that, and if that were the case, correct?
98% finished.
Right, good. And your views, now that the counselor has set forth very well, again, your legal argument, and I think for people that heard Mr. Albert this past Sunday also very forcefully put forth why he thought you should be removed, you have a strong legal argument, obviously, on why you should stay. So let's now diverge, because in fairness, since you missed the show on Sunday, your opponent, Chris Shermeck, again, currently a commissioner of Lackawanna County, running as the Republican nominee, he put forth his case on why he should be the senator, and raised, obviously, several issues. And so I'd like you to talk about your candidacy and why you think the voters should elect you.
Well, Chuck, as you know, I'm in my 5th term as a state representative in the House.
Correct.
I'm the chairman of the Northeast delegation. I serve on appropriations, consumer affairs, insurance, professional licensure. I've been very active in my committee, on all my committees. The reason why I want to run for state senator is I did not expect this opportunity to present itself to me, but when it did, when Senator Blake stepped down, who did a terrific job as senator, the ball bounced in my lap to where I could run and possibly be a senator. And when I sat back and thought about things, you know, I noticed that I can make a huge impact on not only as a representative, as my neighborhood and my community.
Sure.
We're talking my whole entire region and the entire state. Being one of 50 instead of one of 203, you know, you're sitting down making the law and passing the budget. It's over a $30 billion budget that we're passing and putting
36
together.
it might be this year. 36 billion.
It's combined with federal monies. It's up in the 70s.
Yeah, right.
So this is big stuff, and impacting my community in a positive way is something I've always strived and worked to do as a representative, and I'm going to continue to fight for the working class people of northeastern Pennsylvania. Something I'm very focused on.
Right. Well, one of the big things, of course, is you are one of 50. There's only 50 senators in Pennsylvania that are Pennsylvania senators. And secondly, your district expands in terms of your constituents you represent exponentially. Now you have all of Lackawanna County. You have a part of Luzerne County, the upper quarter of it, and you have like half of Monroe County or more. So you're now dealing with 3 counties that you represent.
It's Lackawanna County, okay, it's Monroe County, you get Price Barrett and Coolbaugh 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Right.
And then in Luzerne you have Avoca, DuPont, Duryea, and Pittston Township. So, you know, my whole entire district now, the 113th, sits in this Senate district. But it's going from 66,000 people to basically 250,000 voters.
Now, I think one of the things that your opponent, and I've been watching your commercials and watching his strategy is to try to tie you like this to Governor Tom Wolf and basically say that, you know, you are doing the service more of the governor instead of the people. So your response to that?
There's plenty of times I support Governor Wolf. There's times when I haven't supported Governor Wolf on things. You know, I voted to override him once. You know, one of the 3 times they tried to override the.
And do you remember what
veto.
that specific issue was?
Yeah, that was the issue with parents going to the games with the high school sports and things like that. I felt that if your kids are playing a sport for a school, you have the right to be there. So that was something that I agreed with.
Right. And I would expect that one of the arguments that Chris also made is that if people elect him, he would have a tremendous advantage because it's an overwhelming majority, Republican majority, as you're aware, in the Senate. President Pro Tem Jay Corman's been a guest on the show numerous times, in fact. And his pitch was that, therefore, he could be more effective with the Republican majority. And I like your response, and I guess I'll prompt you by saying, and hearing other Democrats talk, including yourself, that your pitch to the people is, there's a Democratic administration in Washington right now, and there's going to be billions of federal stimulus dollars coming, and that, in fact, the Democrats may be better positioned to make sure the money gets to their district. Is that part of what you're
just look at the relief bill. We had $132 million, $135 million that went to local businesses. I brought back $2.3 million to the county, you know, for businesses affected by COVID. You know, that's nothing that anyone wanted to go through, but, you know, the federal government is stepping up for the people of northeastern Pennsylvania, and I'm here to fight for them to get that money back to our region, into the pockets of our business, to build them back up, because nobody wants to close a business. No elected official on either side wants to close a business down.
Of course.
But, you know, it's just the pains of going through a worldwide pandemic.
Tell the people why they should elect you their senator.
I think I should be elected senator because I have the experience that counts. I've been down there. I'm in my 9th year. I've brought home over $22 million to my constituency. I know where the bathrooms are in Harrisburg. You know, it's tough to say that about anybody else in this race.
Right.
I'm focused on delivering for my community, and I won't stop. I fight to get our fair share, and I'll continue to do so. You know, I've also voted in all the elections in the past 10 years.
We'll be back shortly with a third guest that is also running for this seat, and that is the Green Party candidate, Marlene Sebastianelli, and we'll talk about her credentials and why she wants to be the senator. We'll be right back after these messages.
Every week, Chuck Volpe shares his perspective on Pennsylvania issues in the news and on your mind. From new laws being introduced in Harrisburg and Washington to government spending and even local controversies. Hear how they affect us in Northeast and Central Pennsylvania. Catch Volpe's Views every Tuesday on the Fox 56 News, first at 10.
Marlene, welcome to the Volpe Report.
Hi, Chuck. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. First of all, congratulations for pursuing public office. We need more young and good people to get involved in politics. Your opponents, two of your primary opponents, the Republican nominee and the Democratic nominee, are veterans of the wars. One is an incumbent Lackawanna County Commissioner, Chris Shermeck, the Republican nominee, and of course Marty Flynn, a five-term member of the House of Representatives as a Democrat. So I want to applaud you, because most people would look at that as a formidable challenge. They're the main party, major party candidates. You come as a member and representative of the Green Party, filed your petitions and got all those signatures and did all the things to get on the ballot. What I want to kind of get into is the first and most important question. Effectively, you're a private citizen, not holding any public office. You're running for a high public office, Pennsylvania senator of the 22nd Senatorial District. You had to wake up one morning and say, I'm going to do this. Tell our viewers why.
This past year has been an extraordinary, difficult challenge. Small businesses devastated, overwhelmed nursing homes and healthcare. Our unemployment system was strained, and then our schools were left without avenues of being able to provide the best education for our children and grandchildren. That's why I feel that with my real life, personal and professional experience, I bring the most to this candidate race to be able to support the people and have a voice in Harrisburg.
You know, one of the ways that you'll be distinguishing your candidacy from the major party candidates, you mentioned, that's quite a mouthful you just said. You talked about nursing home, you talked about small business devastation in the pandemic, you talked about school, the burden that placed on families and children and young men and women who were kind of ripped from their proms and graduations and sports and all of the like. So let's go piece by piece. Of course, our audience now knows you are the Vice President of Operations for a large healthcare provider known as Sabre. And in that capacity, you were involved with regulatory compliance of nursing homes, and obviously you're very familiar. The viewers on this show specifically have heard me rail for a year as being an outspoken critic of our Governor, Tom Wolf, his grossly negligent handling of the nursing home situation, sending COVID-positive patients to nursing homes at the same time he was shutting everybody else down in small businesses. Now, you have a first-hand executive's experience in looking at that situation, so give us your view of what took place. Now we're involved in a vaccine being distributed, so you can kind of tie all that together and give an overview. It's still not going well, but give me your thoughts on it.
You're right. The whole process of how everything transpired in the nursing home and even in the hospital environment it was a reactive approach. Instead of going around and the process of getting things in place and implemented in the facilities to make sure that those people could be taken care of, it was hurry up and get them somewhere. Right. So they were somewhere, not taking into effect the back end of what was going to happen, not having the supplies, the infection control things that they needed, and the staff to take care of them. Most of the staff were getting sick in that. And now we are into the vaccine part of it. We are on this whole big rollout to get everybody vaccinated. Back in January and February, our nursing homes were vaccinated. But now we have new residents coming into the nursing home. There's high turnover in the nursing home and the healthcare positions, so we have new employees coming in. The facilities have no access to vaccine. So we need to implement a policy and get something in place so the residents that are coming from the community can be vaccinated, so they're not bringing it to the nursing homes, and our new employees coming into the facility have an avenue for the vaccination to get it. Or we're going to be back in the same, we're seeing our numbers start to decline. Our nursing homes were the hardest hit, where we had the most deaths. That's something that should be forefront and foremost of what we're trying to do now, moving forward, since we didn't manage it the right way before.
And you're basically saying they're not managing the right way with the vaccine distribution now.
We need it right, and we need to get that right.
Yeah, agreed. Well, that's a big issue. We have per capita by region, we have one of the older populations in the Commonwealth and even in the country. Again, my viewers will remember me pointing out that when the governor was shutting down all businesses unfairly and, as we found out, unconstitutionally by a federal judge, you know, they were saying that we had to do that to flatten the curve and to save lives. 83% of the deaths, Marlene, through 4 or 5 months last year were from nursing homes. Why are you penalizing everybody else? And oh, by the way, why are you getting the nursing home thing wrong? I mean, you would think they were like Petri dishes.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. There's a lot of work to be done there still. There's still opportunity and simple things that can be presented and implemented.
Yeah. Well, now let's talk a little bit about another facet of your background that makes you eminently qualified to be a senator, especially in the current state of affairs. You're a small business owner. So talk a little bit about your small business experience and specifically how the pandemic affected you, because it destroyed many small businesses and you're still here.
You know, I'm the owner of Casi Quattro Winery, co-owner of Intact Health and Wellness, and my livelihood was completely taken away from me, and especially on the winery side, because all of my big wine festivals, everything that I would be going out and doing events and making money on was taken away from me. So instead of looking at that through a different avenue of maybe looking at size, so we weren't completely taking everything away from them, maybe we could have started with that to see if there really was an impact of how many people in space and social distancing and that, to do that from the beginning versus just shutting everything right down. But something that I did to be able to help in the community, I knew that I wouldn't be able to affect the change on the governor level, is I reached out to other small businesses. And what I did in my winery, I could only do takeout, so people could come in, call over the phone, get their takeout and take it, is I went to other area businesses and I started bringing their business to my business.
Right.
So you could come in, and it was like a one-stop shop. You can come in, you could buy your chocolate. If you wanted to get some Bath and Body products, you needed a birthday gift, art, clothing, like I had other stuff there to help promote and keep us all afloat at the same time. Right. So the other thing too is there was grants that were given out throughout the county.
Right.
And I know people that put in for those grants 3, 4 different times, and they were denied every time.
Wow.
So we need to look at the fair process of how that grant process was given when there were other people that we know weren't necessarily following the guidelines as they were supposed to be, but they still received those grants.
Right.
So I think the fairness of how that process is something that needs to be relooked at for future in the event that something like this happens again.
Sure. Great answer, Marlene. Let's now put it in context of, again, you woke up one day and decided to be senator. We've established your credentials. We've also established your unique qualifications for now, especially your nursing home background, your healthcare background as an executive, as well as you're being a small business owner of 2 businesses and dealing with the pandemic. What would you do as a senator to help alleviate these things, and why should people vote for you?
Well, I think I'm the right choice, not the best person. I always say the right choice because I have a very well diverse background. I grew up in a large family, and it was hard growing up. We had 9 kids that we had to put clothes on our back, food on our table. We worked alongside migrant workers growing up, and I had to work for that every single day. And I'm not ashamed of that. I'm not, feeling any way that that's something that hurts me in any way. I feel that that is to help develop me into the fighter and the determined person that I am today, and I can relate to that. I'm also a breast cancer survivor. Okay. Through my breast cancer journey, I was confronted with one of the most difficult things, and that was my health insurance changed. Okay. I had a great health team taking care of me through my cancer, but then my insurance dictated me that I had to change and go to somewhere else because I didn't cover it anymore.
We hear that a lot.
And I think that's something that's a big focus that we need to work on so our people's health is first and not insurance. So I think that I have a lot of opportunity that I can bring common sense solutions and present them and get them into legislation to help our common average person. Taxes is another huge opportunity for us. I know that Kyle Mullins, Representative Kyle Mullins and Senator Blake have worked on getting some grants back to this area. We hear a lot about the stormwater issues and the taxes and that, but that's going all back onto the residents and the constituents and some of the areas where they should be the ones that are affected by it. Now we're facing our taxes being increased again in the county after we just went through the worst year for so many people that are trying to get back on track with life.
Well, again, we were here today with Marlene Sebastianelli, and you've heard from her extensive experience in healthcare. She's a small business owner. She has some unique qualifications to be senator for the 22nd Senatorial. And remember, this is a special election. You can vote she's the Green Party candidate. You can vote across party lines, unlike most primaries. This is a special election, so you can vote for her if you consider her candidacy to be the best one. We'll be back next week, next Sunday at 11:30 with another guest. We'll see you then.